we're all here. I only listed a few things, but I'm sure you might have others that I forgot. Everybody knows the industry is going through a lot of crises, and but more specifically and more recently, there's a fallout of Bill C-18. Both Facebook and Google are actively unlinking or delisting news or news outlets or news stories. Even sharing of news is severely curbed or disabled in many Canadian regions. Paid ads, the return on investment is shrinking. This is not recent. This has been going for the last few years. If you have been involved in any kind of advertising or marketing, you have seen less response and fewer clicks, fewer visits as more competition ramps up on these two platforms. And frankly, as they just optimize for performance, and because both work more or less on bidding process, whoever has the biggest pockets wins the day. The other two reasons we might be here, social channels are eroding trust. The big one and most recent and probably hilarious to watch from the sidelines is Twitter becoming X, or whatever it is called these days. Once well known for breaking news and sharing information and direct contact with journalists and lifestyle stories and your niche following or your niche topic, whatever that may be, recent weeks, months, probably close to a year, have been just dumpster fire of all kinds of journalistic standards abandoned or restricted, all kinds of misinformation, disinformation resurfacing, all kinds of advertising shifts. Big familiar brands are fleeing, and small, second-rate or downright spammy brands coming to it and advertising very openly, very freely. Not to mention the dismantling of their trust team. The organic search from social channels also seems to be eroding. I don't know how deeply you went into your analytics, but you might be seeing that as well. Some social channels are evolving their algorithms and putting more viral or more interesting stories or more engaging stories up front. Usually it could be at the cost of organic or at the cost of authentic or at the cost of maybe, a good story, a positive story that nobody's bickering about and fighting about. So algorithmic feed versus organic feed, we definitely see a performance difference. And I put TikTok in here as an example of emerging social channel that is not as evolved or as matured yet. So a lot of people are flocking to it and staying on it because they just haven't delved so much and so deep into the same or similar paid or auction or amplification system that many other channels did. And the last one, not least, web teams have downsized. We had downsizes at 2016. We had downsizes just a couple of weeks ago from Metroland. Late summers are typical of all kinds of either public or Friday afternoon announcements. We're losing skills, we're losing visibility. So how do we bring customers back? And I promise this little paragraph is probably the most depressing of the session, so it's all going to be uphill from here. I have 10, actually scratch that, 11 ideas for it. I like to over-deliver. And I basically put them in a simple kind of a 4-quadrant system. And it's not quite SWOT. I do list benefits and I do list best practices. But one of the things I try to focus on each one of these ideas or each one of these suggestions is who exactly does it. For some of you, it might be the same person, department of one, department of two. But if you are in the luxury of having multiple people or multiple departments for your web or for your online presence, then definitely some designation or ownership of these initiatives would be great. So let's start from the easiest one and the most obvious ones is newsletters. Not only they have been on the rise in the last year and a half, maybe part of the pandemic and everybody being locked down, maybe part of the kind of natural coming back from all the socials and all the other platforms to having your own list and your own first-party data and your own direct relationship with subscribers. They are coming back, and companies that did them well are only expanding them, either expanding their reach or having offshoots or having co-branded newsletters, maybe topical, maybe by specific authors or writers. There are definitely a lot of benefits of either starting your own list from scratch, it's never too late, or just evolving the list you already have. The costs for that are cheap. It's probably the oldest way of acquiring people. The little notepad in any store or any event to just sign up. People do trust events and brands and small businesses and medium-sized businesses with their email. They do trust that relationship of, I give you the email address and you send me something preferably irrelevant to me, preferably at the time I want, and then I have my own freedom to consume it and engage with your content or your brand in some way or another. These initiatives still work. Usually it's handled by editorial and design teams. You probably should design the newsletter to reflect your web presence, to reflect your storefront, so that what they see in their mailbox or on their small on the screen kind of sort of reminds them of the in-person or in-print association or visualization they have with you. So not just text, not just editorial, definitely design. If you have B2B or B2C focus, then there might be some consideration for being punny versus earnest. I don't know about your preferences. I personally am subscribed to both punny and silly SEO practices newsletter, and then very earnest, very kind of dry and cut, and this is what you do, this is what you don't. There's no puns. I like them both. I read one of them and roll my eyes at the cutesy headlines, but I keep subscribing because they do have content in them. And I like the other one because they're just earnest. They tell me what needs to be done and they tell me what doesn't. So the tone and the voice should definitely reflect your target audience and reflect what it is they engage with. For best practices, if you are scheduling or producing your newsletter, do look into mechanisms that automate article pickup. Avoid linking to paywall articles. It's really a disservice both to your readers if they have to click and then consider paying or logging in or subscribing. And it's also probably a disservice to the outlet you're trying to promote. They might not visit them again because subconsciously they couldn't read that one story that your newsletter told them about a few weeks ago. So avoid doing that. It's best to build on freely available or promoted materials. And then for the practices, once you establish your newsletters, take a look at your frequency, take a look at your best hours, when people engage best, and then try to tweak for it and monitor any bounce rates, monitor any unsubscribes. There are always ways to optimize because the rule of thumb is your audience is always evolving and their consumption is always changing. So a newsletter that was, for example, doing really well on Friday nights might actually get better readership or better open rates on Sunday mornings. So regularly keep checking your engagement and tweak and go where the audience is with these. Otherwise, things become stale. Next one, we could spend a lot of time on it, and we'll probably come back to it. Social channels. We have seen erosion from them, but a big part of it is because social channels have all matured and are currently going through the phase of just monetizing and extracting as much value for them as possible. That doesn't mean they don't have value for you still. It just means you probably should spend less time on them. So the entry point is still relatively cheap. It's just time consuming to build some kind of a presence on it. But the benefits are great for matured audiences. Sorry, for matured social channels, you could still have decent return and decent engagement from your existing following. From emerging, if you are tracking with them very well, then you will continue tracking them very well. At some point, it will all plateau, so engage with them a little bit less to save your production time, which is probably limited, but you will still have some kind of return from them every time you tweet or every time you post or pin or whatever. Differentiation is a great example as well. The platforms, there are so many of them now, they have to differentiate themselves from each other, not only for their audiences. So, for example, sorry about that. For example, Pinterest is primarily women, Reddit is primarily gamers, TikTok is primarily videos. That's the beginning, that's the surface level, but definitely dive a little bit deeper because we're talking about hundreds of millions of users on each. You don't have to appeal to everybody. You could appeal to just your group or subgroup or subgroup, and you will still have a few 100,000, maybe a million, which is a fraction for the social channel considerations, but could be a great visibility and engagement for your brand. A lot of new eyeballs, a lot of new followers, and of course, different platforms upcoming. I listed things like LinkedIn and Messenger apps and Apple News in here. I'm not sure if they fit more under content publishers or social channels. We'll discuss them a little bit more later, but definitely consider them. Each one of them appeals to a specific user base. They are national, they're global wide, so really just go after the audience that fits your topic, fits your interests, and you'll probably find them. And really, time zones and consumption is really not relevant at this point, so it's very easy to reach them. I also listed Fediverse, Mastodon, and Discord in here. They're a little bit more hands-on. You have a bit more control over the instance or whatever channel or the server you set up. So it's sort of like running your own, but it kind of follows the same idea. You have a presence, you have a voice, you slowly build an audience around it, and hopefully you build enough of it so that if you have to promote something or you have to post something, they will come back to your site. Who does it? Editorial and design team. Probably marketing team if you have specific voice consideration. You might have one voice for print, one voice for web, and a slightly different tone for socials. That makes sense. So marketers might help you to kind of juggle these three personas or personalities internally so that messaging is clear. Best practices, the one that I probably didn't say loud enough 5 or 10 years ago, each social media channel should be a funnel back to your site and not the other way around. The biggest gap or the biggest blind spot for a lot of publishers has been we overpublished, we overshared. The idea is you post something, you tweet, maybe tease something, and then if you have enough following, enough people will come back and enough people will engage on your site, on your pages, on your terms, where you probably have already funnels set up and conversions and all that fancy stuff. So please keep in mind, these are great platforms. There's all kinds of engagement and immediate viral social component to them, but it is still not your platform. So as you grow, monitor your user engagement, monitor your acquisition costs, monitor the production time of all of these videos or posts or infographics, whatever it is you're sharing, and notice when you hit the plateau. Sooner or later you will, and then it's time to just stay at a certain level or probably discover another social channel. We'll probably go through a period of acquisitions and consolidations, but for the time being, if it grows and if it brings you new eyeballs, then definitely invest some time in it. Just don't overinvest. RSS syndication, I'll mention it very quickly, and it's not just inviting people to subscribe individually to your content using RSS, using their RSS apps. You could go a little bit beyond that. You could have apps that do that for you. So we had a couple that have faded out, but Feedly, Pocket, Focus Reader are still around. Again, they might be niche. They might be very industry specific, but when each one of these apps has millions or tens of millions users, maybe your little few 100,000 segment population or audience is in there and they're just waiting for some easy way to engage with your content. But more importantly, RSS syndication is something that's built into WordPress, into CMS that runs 40-45% of the web as of this week or whatever the number is. It's built in, so bringing in external content to your site and sharing your content with other websites through a couple of keystrokes, through 5-minute, 3-minute setup, is a really good way to cross-populate and cross-pollinate content. We'll talk about it a little bit more later. This is purely from a technical standpoint. It's really simple. It's in the name. Do consider it. Don't dismiss it, because a couple of really well-known platforms that shared it have been bought off or became paid. The underlying functionality is still there. Organic SEO, staying on a technical side a little bit. The benefits are usually long-term. The more well-structured your content is, and the more seasonal it is, like a turkey recipe or spring break vacation or back to school sales, the better organized and the more linked it is, the more value it gives you year after year after year. So it's really good to have a lot of those evergreen or long-term stories to not only maintain a steady visit of organic search results, but also good for link building and authority building. As you publish more, your own brand's authority increases and improves, and your authors, whoever your columnists or regular contributors are, they all benefit from it. So if all of this information is available, and Google has been going very aggressively after authentic, useful, relevant information, as opposed to 5 to 10 years ago with keyword stuffing and second-rate content farms. These are slowly being phased out and de-indexed and delisted, which means it's an opportunity for really authentic, different, and quality content to float up. In fact, the most recent Google service update, Google search update, I think it's called, I have it bookmarked here, Helpful Content Update, September 2023. They are just finished it maybe a week ago, re-indexing and putting more emphasis on original content and original idea. As a result, no surprise, a lot of link exchanges of content farms got lower in the ranking. So your opportunity. The costs for it are really cheap. You just have to publish good quality content. There's plenty of plugins that allow you to do that right on the fly. They score your content. They make recommendations for headlines rewriting, content rewriting, better keyword focusing, but it is time consuming. So if it's not part of your editorial or publishing content process right now, definitely consider training your editorial team to go through these SEO optimization steps before they hit publish. It really makes a difference. So for best practices, as I mentioned, use a plugin. Most of them are free. The paid ones just give you a lot more information. These plugins build habits for better writing or for better content structure. Use any metrics that you have for server performance. It's not just the quality of the content, but also how quickly it loads onto people's mobiles or tablets. So core web vitals, page loads, server performance, all of these technical elements do add up. You could have the best article in the world, but if the second best article loads a little bit faster, they will show up higher in search results than you. It's as simple as that. So keep that in mind. And that's why the top right group in there at the top, it's editorial, design, and tech team assisting. You need the webmaster, you need the IT person to help you optimize all that content so that even though it's slick, it's still very fast, very quick loading, and the images have sharp, clear content on them so that people can get to the content quicker. And of course, search engines will appreciate and reward you for it with a higher ranking in the list. Alt tags is a personal bane of mine. I still see a lot of well-structured stories that just don't have alt tags. Please put them on all your images. Please put them on all your images. Accessibility is a law, so you're not just helping your SEO rankings. People might be visiting your site and your stories with disabilities, or they might be using disability-enabled browsers. If the browser can't read what's on the image, that image is just a rectangle and has no purpose and no function. So please use accessibility laws and accessibility recommendations to quantify and label and describe everything that you're putting into your story that's not just text. So infographics, videos, photos, illustrations, etc., etc. The next couple are really big ones, and I think we're going to come back to them. Homepage improvements. I did put in brackets homepage rules again, but actually it's a little bit different. I've been looking at the analytics for new visits or unique visits for a number of customers since the last maybe 2 or 3 months, since middle of the summer. And it's not that the home pages have gained more percentage of visits, they've lost less. So the overall site might have lost maybe 10% of overall visits summer to summer because of all kinds of shrinkages and losing audiences, but homepage lost 8. So that just intuitively means that people are spending a little bit more time on it. They're maybe not being driven away from it as much as the other pages. So things to consider in here are better user flow and content discovery. I know our home pages have been very busy in the last few years, a lot of opportunities to sell, a lot of opportunities to put really big, really aggressive ads. Has anyone looked at the bounce rates for the home pages when you run a really aggressive takeover campaign? Take a look at them. They will be higher than usual. People see a lot of ads, they bounce, and they never come back to your page again. So as difficult as it is to discuss that with your ad people, with your marketing people, do have that conversation and actually consider putting in more content, maybe putting ads a little bit lower between the big sections, feature all of your topics, feature all of your big regular categories so that whoever is coming to your homepage has a chance to actually dive a little bit deeper and click a little bit further instead of seeing a big bad ad and just fleeing. It's really less is more. strategy in here, and I do understand that some of these conversations are difficult to have. Another benefit of homepage tweaks or improvements is not only you could find new advertisement positions that are still performing well but not driving people away, you might have opportunities for clicks to actions. So not just funneling people to stories. You could funnel people to different departments. Maybe you want them to get to your events team or get to your marketing team. All kinds of cohorts of audiences go to your homepage, primarily looking for stories. Sometimes they're looking for a service or a department. So find a way to identify these groups of people and funnel them easier. Anything that goes beyond the homepage and bounce is a lot more valuable, whether it's 2 pages, 3 pages, or 10 pages they go through. It all incrementally brings familiarity and builds loyalty of your customers. The costs for these are pretty steep because essentially you have to do A/B testing. You have to try a week with ads a little bit lower on the page and then a week with ads higher just to see how they perform, etc., etc. So A/B testing will drive up the costs, but because homepages are so multi-purposed, it's probably worth a look. For best practices, definitely look at your desktop versus mobile versus tablet usage. A lot of websites have identified their best usage. So when you visit the same page or the same site on mobile, some of the elements are just removed or hidden because they don't get as much engagement on mobile. So we just hide them. Not only it drives people closer to the stories they need to get on their small screen, it also has the benefit of speeding up the page load. So doing these kind of modeling and presenting a little bit more generically on the desktop, because first of all, there's more space. Second of all, we all have relatively fast speed at home. Gives a lot of benefit to both types of uses, or 3 types of uses in case of your tablet usage being a little bit differently. Avoid personal bias in user experience. Your personal experience with the homepage might be very different from your typical audience. This is a big pitfall for a lot of designers, for a lot of editors. Take a look at the analytics. If they consume and engage and funnel differently from you, then don't put the stories you think should do well, put the stories that are doing well. It will definitely change the flow. It will immediately reduce bounce rate, and you might in the process discover an audience that is adjacent or slightly different from your core audience. So these data, these analytics are already there. Don't avoid them. Don't use your personal bias in flow, which leads to content discovery and reader retention. And I repeat again, ads, pop-ups, CTAs should really be moderated on homepage. None if you can afford it. And because it's multi-departments, because it involves tech and marketing and sales and editorial, they have to collaborate together. They have to share the metrics. If you see that one of the departments is underperforming, then see if there's a way to increase engagement with them by moving their widget around, vice versa. The next one is kind of an extension of homepage, user experience across the website. Story flow. Take a look at how your longer stories are doing. Do you need to paginate it? Do you just have an endless scroll? Take a look at how your calls to action are doing. We used to put them on a sidebar. Then at some point we realized that maybe putting them at the bottom of the article is more beneficial because a person getting to the bottom of the article is probably the most engaged and most likely to share, like, subscribe, donate, whatever the case might be. I remember a lot of us talking about the Guardian model for many years. All they did was just ask people to pay at the end of the article rather than at the top. So the Guardian model is now the everyone model. We just have to improve on that. Putting stuff in the stories. 2nd paragraph in, 6th paragraph in. They don't have to be ads. I know ads were there first, and I know it's going to be a difficult conversation, again, going back to sales and saying, could you please remove your 3rd or 4th in-content ad so we could do a CERC promotion? In many cases, it's worth it. In many cases, the data will support it, that if a person reading something that they engage with, they will subscribe, and the value from that subscription might be the same or even higher than ads. Also, in the lights of shrinking CPMs. The math is on your side. Bring it up, figure out what the worth of a single subscription is, or event, or donation, or even a newsletter subscription is versus fraction of a penny for a big box, and test it. It's really good to take a look at these tests and see what works best. Typically, less is more, And if you have still relatively good CPM and much higher conversion as a result of reducing ads and engaging people through various conversions on the funnels, not only you could drive your CPMs higher, you also increase your page speed because there are fewer calls to ad server. So, intuitively, secondary, tertiary, there is a benefit to just having a better user experience by having fewer surprise external things loaded on the site. And of course, it's loyalty building for anyone who is considering between different models, reader supported versus advertising supported versus SERG, maybe paywalls, all kinds of hybrid models. The appeal of a ad-free experience might be a lot more stickier and a lot more beneficial to your bottom line ROI than ad-supported. Again, in light of shrinking CPMs, these conversations are becoming easier to have, especially if you have a really good following and people are, not minding opening up their wallets and paying you directly or subscribing to your outlet directly. For best practices, keep it modular and scalable. Design something, a little prototype MVP that works on one page or maybe extend it to one category, and then eventually see if you could do it site-wide, either a replacement of a widget or replacement of a CTA, displacement of an ad, maybe even restructuring of a story. And always monitor performance. One of the things that have been happening in the last few years is as the functionalities of the sites have evolved, we all added a lot of extra bells and whistles and related stories and previous and next and pop-ups, and they all add up. And if you are seeing that your ranking is lower because your page is heavier, take a look at how well they perform. If they don't perform very well, or if they have become blind spots and your readers are not even clicking on these support links or these related articles, strip them off altogether. The page becomes lighter. People will still navigate through other elements of the story, but they will consume it better. They will stick around a little bit longer, and your rank goes up a little bit higher. So going back to SEO. Social sharing. Going back to social channels, not all sharing is equal. You might not want your stories on some platforms. You might not be able to put your stories on some platforms, but assuming that you are available on most of these channels, take a look at who's sending you content already. You'll be surprised. You'll be surprised how well Redditors are sharing. You'll be surprised how well LinkedIn is sharing. It's not just professional and career advice. Take a look at the analytics and present those options to the people. Not only that, email sharing, that's still there. We still, click the little triangle icon, especially on our phone, and just direct it to our families, direct it to our email accounts, direct it to Pocket. That's another one, bookmarking service. Our Telegram channels, our WhatsApp channels and groups. The functionality is there. People who are really engaged with your story, for them, it's 1 or 2 clicks. So providing very easy, very lightweight social sharing, regardless of what the actual platform is great. Even browser notifications. The support for it is spotty. Certain versions of Chrome might not be supporting some browser notifications. I know Apple is restrictive with that, but wherever it's available, that's a good way to reach the customers again. And not only that, your readers will become the champions. So if they're reading something, just the amplification itself has multiple benefits for you, not just for social presence, but a whole bunch of new eyeballs and direct links between social channel and your site. It's also a good way to discover new cohorts and new adjacent audiences. So take a look at who's sharing you where on which of their circles and friends. A lot of very interesting data in there. Some of the best practices for it, consider lightweight and privacy compliant sharing solutions. We've gone through the period where every plugin that was free usually had a bunch of trackers in them. We're not in that era anymore. So, you will be blocked. Your customers will just, stop visiting your site because enough of us know how to use ad blockers, enough of us know how to use tracker blockers. But if it's lightweight and it doesn't track anything, it just mechanically takes your content, takes your URL, and sends it to whatever social. That mechanism, transparent, light, it will work and people will use it. And for template messaging, you could customize it. You could customize the tweet with a little, note directly from you. You could customize the email notification or email sharing with a little stamp and logo, on behalf of your brand. That just builds loyalty again. It's like a miniature newsletter with your little stamp on it. So these little technical elements would really bring in people a little bit quicker and give them an extra second or two to engage and consider reading a little bit more, maybe even subscribing. The next one is pretty big. Again, we could come back to it. I think I still have a couple of minutes. User-generated content. Anything, forums, chats, comments, reviews. Reviews has been a big one, has become a whole new section even on SEO strategies. The idea is the same. Your readers do become champions. They engage with your content. They post on it. They comment on it. They review your stories. They review your products and services, perhaps. All of this not only gives you longer shelf life, it brings them back because everybody wants to see who responded to their first comment first. It brings more links to them. It brings the audiences to specific stories and to specific products. It's a great way to do customer research. So it ties to events, to marketing, to memberships. The only problem with it is expensive. We have built forums. We have abandoned them because Facebook many years ago offered rooms, and then we had tried to replicate that through Reddit, and that didn't go very well. For some of us, it's still possible to rebuild and start from scratch. For others, you might want to do a third-party service. So who does it? Usually editorial team. If you have separate moderation or mod teams would be able to look at it. For tools, there are so many external tools. I used to manage PHP, BB, and V bulletin boardrooms way back in the Canadian gardening days. There's Discord now, which is kind of the same thing, but it's external. There's actually paid services, Discuss, Coral, VFora. Disclaimer, I'm consulting for VFora, so I'll be happy to take you offline and talk about what exactly services they provide. But essentially, any kind of user comments and user reviews where you can collate and you ideally filter through spam, filter through any trolls, and just have clean, public, engaging user experience that they come back to, engage with the stories, engage with the article, engage with each other. That's a great community building mechanism. Whichever tool you use, just look at their SaaS costs or look if they're ad supported, see if you have enough resources to maintain it. It's a great way to bring people back. Cost benefits are right here. Take a look at the actual costs. Some audiences grow very quickly. Some audiences need a lot of cleaning. So trolls and spammers is just a lot of stuff to clean up. Yes, you could automate it by spam filtering and word filtering and IP blocks, all of that stuff, but it still requires a percentage of your moderator or editorial time to allow or disallow what you want to show up next to your stories and what you don't. And because the audience will grow, you probably will get different cohorts and different champions or different kind of moderators within those groups. So take a look at how the audience is already helping you. Some of them might become your moderators. Some of them might get a part-time job at your place because they like the content, they engage with content, and they help clean up all of the adjacent chats and comments and reviews on it. So it's a great way to just grow audience beyond your existing one, both internally and externally. The ads, I want to specifically talk about house ads, again, in light of shrinking CPMs. Take a look at your internal ads. What are you promoting? Is it newsletters? Is it podcasts? Is it maybe your social channels, like a banner that drives people to Pinterest or whatever? Take a look at how they convert. Because the prices for subscriptions have not really gone down where CPMs have, it might be worth it for you to occasionally run house ads in specific times of the year, in specific categories, maybe in specific placements. If their return is competitive, and obviously their yield is direct, like a new subscriber, a new subscription, a new follower, it's directly to you. It's not going through sales, it's not going through RTB or any exchanges. Then it could be a good business case to have a bit of a hybrid, a bit of a balanced approach. Not every ad placement should be external direct ad or RTB. A/B testing is already built in. So if your circulation team is thinking of testing 3 or 4 different, banners for their, fall campaign, run all 3, see which one performs better. So things like that we probably assumed are already happening, but could be beneficial and could improve our performance and convert just a little bit higher are already built in. So running some of these as ads rather than just hard coding the same subscribe now button somewhere on the side or on the bottom is a better idea. Who does it? Again, because it's sales related and dollars are important for everybody, it should be all teams working together. Editorial has needs, marketing has needs for audience building, events team has needs for the next event to amplify. Each team has specific growth requirements. Sales team is the only one that actually has to deliver a certain number of bookings and sales. So it is going to be a negotiation. Do maintain block list and allow list for all ad partners. If you do have multiple partners, there's always somebody trying to sneak in and advertise to your customers, to your audience. Keep an eye on them because direct relationships are more valuable, and we've seen that. After the initial run on RTB and open bidding, we realized that a lot of second rate and just fraudulent exchanges and advertisers are on the market. Verification is not as thorough or as good. Both Google and Facebook are under investigation for this currently. So your direct relationships, please don't abandon them. If you have, if you have your Rolodex of advertisers and they're doing well and performing well, they should get preferential treatment, and RTB definitely should take second or third rate seat. Experiment with tone and placement. For house ads, it's a lot more important than external ads or direct ads. And take a look at the visitors' cohorts, habits. You will see different pattern of consumption. Sometimes people like looking at well-designed, well-placed ads. And other times the UX is so poor, they just bounce no matter how good the ads are. So take a look at what exactly they present, how, obviously, lazy load, things like that. The last one is audience pollination, and this one could really go in every direction. And this step kind of assumes that you've done most, if not all, of the previous ones. Pollinate audiences between similar content outlets, between bloggers that amplify you and support you, actually share stories and cross post. It's good SEO, it's good link building, and you're definitely exchanging parts of your audiences. Anything that involves group rates or memberships or paid newsletters. There is a built-in mechanism in there for one paying for many or few paying for many. So any kind of amplification or sharing or allowing limited access, paywalls is great. Is a good way to introduce and cross-promote not just story by story, but department by department or author by blogger. Apple News is a good example of that. It is a walled garden, but they do allow syndication. Actually, their system is very similarly functioning to RSS. They just call it something else. They will feature your stories on their platform. You could run house ads on those Apple News stories to drive back to your site. There it is. There's a channel. There's a funnel. So things like that you could build. The costs, I honestly don't know. It depends on what audience, what industry you're in, what your current direct or indirect competitors are, who's amplifying you, who's directly impeding you. You have to reach out and do these link building, content building strategies, and usually editorial and marketing teams work on it. Definitely curate for best practice. Definitely monitor production costs. We've all gone through a period where we used all of the digital circulation platform Issue and the next issue, and there's a bunch of others, Pocket Mags, all of these stuff. Eventually, one came out on top, and then that was bought off by Apple by volume. I'm pretty sure if you're looking at your metrics, Apple News is probably the biggest digital subscription provider for you. So all the others might not be even worth the production. So take a look at how much they're actually converting and bringing to you, and make the decision to continue or not with them. We're almost at the end, but I wanted to throw in one last thing. This is really open-ended. Building combos and iterating on all of the stuff we discussed. So ideally, you have already done most of these things. If not, then do try to do 9 out of 10, 8 out of 10 if you want to disappoint me a little bit. But once you have done them, and once you have a good idea of what's involved, what are the costs, what are the production, what is the ROI, is it nudging you by 3%, is it nudging you by 5%, is it actually costing you 2%? looking at these numbers and looking at how they convert, how much they improve your ranking, how much they improve your bounce rate, you could do combos. You could do not just a brand new newsletter, but you could also do a CTA for that newsletter only in certain category of your website. Fewer people see it, so less annoyance, but more of them subscribe. You could do the same thing with RSS. If there's something very specific and people are really flocking to that particular content, you could do RSS that is very custom, that only is provided and only is indicating one of your contents, or maybe one of your authors, and only to one or two very specific, maybe even paid blogs externally. Might not be a lot of people, but that exclusivity, especially syndicated outwards, could bring in enough eyeballs to actually pay for it. And through content partnership plus RSS plus paywall mechanisms put together, you have a brand new revenue stream. Past issues. A lot of you are selling past issues. Are you just displaying them? Is there a nice little grid where all the stories are available? Is it PDF? Is it immediately downloaded to you? Is it going through third-party platforms? Each one of these steps is a barrier to conversion. So if you simplify it and put that particular CTA for that particular back issue on the right story in the right relevant place, you might see an uptake in conversions, an uptake in purchases. So assuming you've done all of these things, not to mention UGC and comments and audience building, there's all kinds of opportunities to grow. Once you see which ones are performing best, kind of pick and choose, again, using MVP system. Use any plugins I mentioned. Ad inserter here I mentioned. If so, any kind of behavioral messaging plugins that identify people, for example, coming from newsletters and giving them some pitch for a newsletter. Sorry, not for a newsletter, but maybe upgrade them to an event or something like that. So any one of these mechanisms, if they work well, combos will amplify even more. If you find an SEO improvement that works on page, but then apply it to a bunch of stories that didn't have it before, cumulative effect will be higher. So building combos and iterating on it is great. So this is a little bit of a back to basics. In fact, if you scroll up and down in the slides, you'll see them on the top right, the little funnel illustration. Some of them will be the top of the funnel to bring in more people to your site. And about the second half of the slides will be the middle of the funnel, retaining them so they don't bounce. So actually doing counterintuitive things like fewer ads. I said it, sue me. Middle and the top of the funnels are probably the most important. I would love to talk about the bottom of the funnels, how best to convert them, but that's a whole other conversation for the next time. So why the fundamentals? Because they might have not changed, and many of them have calcified. We just forgot. We got distracted with shinier new things, new ads, new social channels, new syndication and partnerships, and these things eat a lot of time and yield less and less. So going back to the basics is better. Top of the funnels also happen to be slightly cheaper to implement than UX changes or homepage changes or reassessing story structure. Those are kind of middle of the funnels, retaining people once you get them on the site. Don't ignore on-site user experience. Don't forget that some people do find you through organic, which means they don't know about you. They find you through social, which means they know somebody who knows you, but again, might not know you. And those who visit you directly are your loyal people.
So Sharon asked, can you speak a bit about the impact of the switch to GA4 and best practices?
GA4 has surfaced a lot of acquisition metrics. So where people come from, which channels and campaigns they come from, which is great. But they buried some technical metrics. So page load is not easily available. Page speed is not easily available. You can still get them through Webmaster Tools, but if you are inclined to do this, you need custom reporting. Also, GA4 focuses a lot on real time. The main chart, the main dashboard is very heavily influenced by real time. If you just want historical information, first of all, you have to go to a whole different bookmark before June 30th. And second of all, some of the stuff is no longer available. So recommendation is for me to identify which metrics you're not seeing with GA4, if they're relevant to you, and try to surface them. They do allow custom events and custom goals. You have to define them. You have to implement them in your reports, and they will start surfacing, but they will not show up on your standard report. So for each one of the custom events and goals, you have to create a corresponding report that shows you the trend, and then you have to go to a different URL to get it. So it's a little bit of work with implementation at first. I'm really hoping they will bring in some of the technical tools into it, but right now it looks like they want us to rely a little bit more on developers and coders to surface that information for us.
I have a question for Rita, which is a great one. So what's your advice for no budget indie and niche publishers? Where should we focus our time to best increase our paid readers?
Well, WordPress is still free, and a lot of the plugins for it to enhance the functionality, most of them are free. So that's a good place to start. Creating good content and having it amplified through a really simple to use SEO plugin is probably a good start. So just like Yoast SEO or All-in-One SEO or SEO Framework, those are the three that I use, that I rely on. Right on the page, it will guide you through it. So as you write it, it will help you restructure headlines, sections, put alt tags on all the images, so that once you hit publish, a lot more people are visiting it, a lot more people are viewing it. It's ranking higher than if you published it without going through these steps. So it's on the screen. Social sharing is probably still pretty good. Again, a couple of clicks to install it, position it right. If the story is good, you'll be able to help readers amplify to their circles, to their channels. Mechanically, good layout. I think just good layout of the story or the website. If you start from scratch, then very light, very simple, minimal homepage to drive you to the 3 articles you have, and then ultimately start building navigations, categories, hierarchies, and start reusing older content. But that's probably for a little bit later. So put your best content forward and make it easy to share and amplify. It's already built in.
Okay, so that actually dovetails into just a couple of points that I wanted to return to from what you were talking about, because I get this question probably once a month. What are the CRMs I should be looking at? So at this point, are we all just saying it's WordPress? If you're in media, it's WordPress. If you want to do something else like sell tissue boxes, Squarespace is great, but be on WordPress.
Squarespace is great. It's easy to build pages in there, and they have SEO elements and mechanics in there, except you can't easily export your content. So all of your images and text sit in there. It's not easy to move it around. Shopify is pretty good. They started as just a storefront, but you could build landing pages. It has a built-in CRM, so all of these customers could become like a mailing list that you could communicate with. So it's a little bit more commercial, but relatively easy to build. There's nothing else that comes close to it. OpenText is still around. Movable Type, I think, is still around. Maybe somebody bought it.
Yeah.
There might be others. Joomla is great. I still know a couple of websites that are on it. I think U of T is primarily still on it. They're in the process of migrating to WordPress for cost reasons. But Joomla is a little bit more technical. However, it does have performance caching and SEO built in. You don't need a plugin. It actually optimizes out of the box for those things. It's just a little bit more technical. WordPress 46% of the web, so I'm sure some competitor will come along, and as long as this one is free, I don't have any recommendations to leave it. But we might be faced with some massive.
But I think when you get to the point where you have to find help, it can be a challenge if you're not on something where people are widely using it, which is, I think, one of the reasons why I just say just be on WordPress. But you talked about so many, again, every single slide there was and there's a plugin, and there's a plugin, and there's a plugin, and a plugin can make it easier for you. And those plugins are really being built for that platform.
Which reminds me, just a couple of weeks ago, I saw a really good post in some tech blog, 50 best plugins to have installed in your new site. So it's not only recommending things for you to use, it's recommending for startup, just to have all of these checks covered, both for security and performance and SEO and usability and shareability. So I should have probably included it. And if you give me a couple of minutes, I'll find it offline and send it to you before you send the presentation to the attendees.
I actually did have questions, because I think in terms of a 10-second consult, people always want to know then, what is the expert reading? So maybe you can just maybe you can put together a little list of the newsletters that you like and the places that you go for information, because kind of as publishers trying to do everything off the side of our desk in some ways, we can't read everything, but knowing what an expert reads would be super, super helpful. So
I can give you one right now if you want.
yeah.
I'm actually listing it for my Seneca students later this week. It's easy to remember. WTF SEO. So I don't know if it's a newsletter or a Substack, but just put those 6 letters in.
Okay.
It's exactly what it's about. I think it's the punny one, or maybe it's the other one.
Okay.
I don't know. It's one of the. It's one of the. It's only weekly. They cover all the kind of standard foundational stuff, but they also cover the latest trends in search changes, in lawsuits, and indexing. So it's the best of both worlds. That is good for newbies and for experts. WTF SEO.
WTF SEO. Okay. Lisa Whittington Hill has a question about any tips on easy ways to educate readers and audiences on Bill C-18 and why they can't access your content on platforms like Facebook. I've seen the Walrus and Broadview doing some different things. So
yeah, I think that's pretty much it. You have to inform your readers and say that you can't access it because we're dealing with petty platforms.
So using Twitter to tell your audience that they won't see you on Facebook, using LinkedIn more than you had been, sending a newsletter out.
I think you should still announce it on as many platforms as you can. You just have to curb your expectations. If the platforms are being petty and if the legislation is not in place to change their behavior, then expect whatever 30, 40, 50% drop in that particular channel performance. It's unfortunate, and it is on the industry to change. Maybe lawsuits will make a dent. I'm not happy about this either, but it's beginning to kind of push back. I'm really following the antitrust stories from both Europe and West Coast.
Yeah,
maybe,
I think so.
maybe, but you have to be upfront. I mean, being upfront with the readers is the bottom line. If they can't follow you on one channel, well, then that's a good opportunity to funnel them somewhere else. But throughout it all, it's still not your platform. So whatever that beachhead you have, it might be washed off tomorrow. You could invest a little bit to just maintain it. Don't overinvest it, because so far each one of them has disappointed us. And newsletters and RSS and direct on-page comments or engagements or forums are still around years, decades later. They're still around. So those would be the fundamentals, and those are within your control. Everything else is give and take, and it's sometimes they really perform, and sometimes they take that away, and you have to fight for it.
Yeah. Well, I think I wish we had 10 more minutes to talk about newsletters, but I think we should leave everybody with, if you do one thing today, increase the frequency of your newsletters and tell people that they're not going to see you on Facebook, at least for the time being.